So, yeah. I'm doing the thing again. In October of 2021, which feels like an eternity ago, I did a pretty unusual video by my standards at least. It was a feature-length retrospective talking about a traditional TV show rather than a video game. Specifically, I discussed Azumanga Daioh and what made it work so well for me. It's a series that's just so easy to fall in love with its charming cast of characters, their entertaining, funny relationships with each other, and the relatable struggles they go through in their day-to-day lives. I was never huge into anime, but Azumanga gave me a deeper appreciation of it, more than I've ever had in my life anyway. Safe to say I wanted more. I still have a huge backlog of shows that I'd like to watch at some point, you know, slice of life comedy stuff. Partially because I wasn't so sure I was ready to jump into some weird shonen stuff that preaches about how friendship can literally stop the apocalypse, featuring huge mech battles, or something like that. I mean, that stuff sounds cool and all, but after watching Azumanga, I was in the mood for shows similar to it. You know, some more lighthearted, wholesome fun to further ease me into anime. There were, so many options for what I could watch next. You know, Lucky Star, K-On!, Nanambiori, Hidamari Sketch, Yuru Yuri, all sorts of shows that I know about, but my choice became clear after only a little bit of consideration. If you're a fan of Azumanga Daioh and are looking for a similar show to watch, practically everyone will recommend one series in particular. Well, you saw this video and clicked on it, so I'm pretty sure you're able to infer what show I'm talking about here. Why, it's none other than My Ordinary Life, known in Japanese as simply Nichijou. I'll be using its Japanese name for brevity's sake. Just make sure not to get it confused with, I'm definitely gonna butcher this, so I'm sorry to any potential Japanese viewers. Danshi Kokosei no Nichijou, or in English, Daily Lives of High School Boys. The Nichijou in this video is the one about the daily lives of high school girls, so if you came for the other one, you want to look elsewhere. In any case, if you've been living under a rock all these years and haven't heard of this series, well, I'll fill you in. Nichijou started pretty much the same way every other anime in existence did. It was a manga, which for those who are unfamiliar, it's essentially just comics made in Japan. Nichijou was a prominent member of the slice of life genre, as I said already. As opposed to shonen, which in many cases can be compared to superhero comics here in the West, Nichijou and other manga like it are most comparable to Garfield or other such comedy strips. It was originally serialized in 2006 by, I'm so sorry once again, I'm going to butcher this name, Keiichi Arawi, and it would run until 2015. In 2011, an anime adaptation was produced by Kyoto Animation, the same studio behind the Lucky Star and K-On! Anime. Basically, they've adapted several cornerstones of the genre over the years. Initially, it actually received relatively mixed reviews and had poor sales. Its anime adaptation was also a commercial failure for Kyoto Animation, and as a result, any possible plans for a second season were dropped. I don't know exactly why it was so unsuccessful at first, but you know how that goes. People thought Socrates was a meth head when he was alive, but centuries later... Okay, kind of a bad example. Socrates was a weird mother sucker, but you get my point. That wasn't the end of the story, though. Nichijou would gradually be vindicated by history. Distribution rights were eventually picked up by Funimation, who released the series on Blu-ray in the West in 2017. They even went on to produce an English dub 2 years later. Following this, Nichijou would be critically reassessed as a comedy masterpiece, and it would become one of, if not the most popular slice-of-life series ever. In fact, the retrospective love for Nichijou is so strong that the manga re-entered serialization right around the time I uploaded my Azumanga Daioh video. Weird how things can line up so perfectly like that, you know? In fact, some people who aren't keen on this genre have stated that they enjoyed this particular series. I first heard about Nichijou around the same time I discovered Azumanga, so maybe around 2014 or 2015 or so. In fact, I found out about a lot of anime back then, but I never got around to watching any of them. I just didn't know where the hell to even watch them, and honestly wouldn't have wanted to back then because it would be all I'd be thinking about during high school classes. Also, let's be honest, I went to an all-boys high school, and if they found out that I was an anime watcher, I would be relentlessly made fun of, so yeah. Anyway, come February 2021, I finally took it upon myself to watch Azumanga Daioh and fell in love with it. And that's when I set my sights on this series. Like I said, it's the #1 series that gets recommended to people who enjoy a show from this genre, so no shit it would be my first choice. This is when I learned some pretty crazy things I never knew about it before, including the fact one of the main characters was actually a robot. Well, alright, now I have to watch this, because that sounds fucking awesome. That by itself already sounds like a recipe for really funny scenarios. Over spring break last March, I started a free Crunchyroll trial to watch it, only to find out it was unavailable there, so I had to start a free trial of Funimation to watch it. Only for it to be re-added to Crunchyroll after I had already seen it. I couldn't make this shit up if I tried. It's like the universe actually decided, yeah, fuck this guy in particular. Point is, I finally got to watch Nichijou for myself. I was excited to see what it had in store, and to see if I agreed with all the praise it had gotten over the years. I loaded up the first episode on Funimation and proceeded to spend the following evening and morning afterwards watching it. So, what did I think of it? Yeah, I kind of liked it. Well, I spoiled that in the title, but nevertheless, this video won't be this insane hot take where I tear down a beloved piece of media. Nichijou lives up to the hype surrounding it and then some. Needless to say, that's why I'm making this video. To basically just share my enjoyment for yet another slice of life anime series with the world. Even if I don't end up saying new things or offering some new insight about it. Because, let's be honest, this video is probably going to be stuff you heard about already. It's probably redundant to be doing this, but... You're looking at the guy who made a whole retrospective on the Mario series. Do you think I cover hot topics? As I did with Azumanga Daioh, I'll be solely focusing on the anime adaptation.
So guess what? Actually, that's why I read the manga during production of this video and screen capped the whole fucking thing, so that's why you can see some manga panels right now. Do far.
Fun fact, I actually wrote a folder generator in Python to sort the manga panels, so that's kind of cool. So with all that said, here it is. This is what makes Nichijou click for me, and no doubt so many other people as well. I have to be perfectly honest about something though. Azumanga Daioh is a series that's not nearly as well known, nor as respected as it used to be in the, I don't know what else to call it, current media consumption climate, so I really felt like I had something to say there. You know, something to add to the conversation. In the case of Nichijou though, like I said, I don't feel as confident in that regard, but I hope you'll stick around and enjoy regardless. I'm not really sure where to begin, so why not start from the basics? As mentioned, Nichijou is a slice of life comedy series. I haven't explained what the hell that even is, and people unfamiliar with anime terminology were probably confused beyond belief. Well, the term is a little nebulous and loosely defined, to be honest. When you hear the term, you should be thinking shows like SpongeBob, or arguably something like early Regular Show, maybe. It's basically a subset of the comedy genre. Typically, they downplay strict continuity in favor of their humor. It's not that absolutely nothing happens in them, but the focus is placed on the characters, their daily experiences, and jokes above all else. Now, you might be naively asking, how the hell can a show that has no larger ongoing story be any good? I'll admit the premise doesn't exactly sound exciting, but still, allow me to tell you how such a series can not only be good, but exceptional. This may spark some fierce debates, but I think that's a bit of a closed-minded way of thinking. Yeah, personal taste and all, and if this genre just genuinely isn't your cup of tea, that's totally fair. These are just opinions on media, they're not gonna hurt anyone. That being said, I still want to explain myself right here and now so that my perspective on this issue is clear. I have no clue if I'll ever make another video like this, so now's my chance. While my tastes tend towards more exciting or fast-paced stuff because I find it cool or interesting, I can get just as much enjoyment out of more laid-back, wholesome stuff if it's done well. There is absolutely a place for this genre, and I'd go so far as to say it's even refreshing to have a series like this. You know, where you can kick back and relax without having to worry about missing out on or remembering a bunch of crucial plot details. Where it's like SpongeBob, where you can just pop an episode on and just watch to your heart's content. What drives me crazy about the conversation surrounding this genre isn't the fact that people dislike it, because that's opinions like I just said. It's just that vocal minority around it that makes discussion a huge pain on occasion. I'm not referring to anyone in particular, but rather the ideas, and truth be told, this is a very, 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 very small minority. I want to emphasize that, but it's still there. It's a problem with internet discourse in general, honestly, but anime discussion seems to be one of the places it's most prominent. If you ask me, I find the act of hating something because of what it isn't is absurd. It's the same mindset that led to the gradual decay of Sonic over the last decade, but that's a story for another video. We can talk about that later. I'm talking about Nichijou here. Nichijou was able to win me over, and to be frank, it's not nearly as devoid of substance as some people will lead you to believe. Like Azumanga Daioh, it's a series that's so easy to fall in love with. Well, as long as you're willing to give it a fair chance, that is. While it won't be a show for everyone like the rest of the genre, it's absolutely a show for me. It's an absolute joy to watch, and I love it. Capital L love it, and for a wide assortment of reasons too. Hell, and this is crazy coming from me, I even say it manages to outdo Azumanga Daioh in certain aspects. It's yet another show that's both laugh-out-loud hilarious and full of heart from start to finish. Nichijou is a series that, like Azumanga Daioh, revolves around a group of high school students, most of whom are female. It follows them as they go through their day-to-day experiences, including all the good and bad days. Sounds like a recipe for some pretty ordinary events. I mean, it's even in the show's English name, My Ordinary Life. But a lot of what happens is anything but ordinary. It's like Regular Show in that sense, insofar as the title itself is a joke. Really fitting for a comedy series like this. As opposed to Azumanga Daioh, which felt strongly themed around the school itself, Nichijou seems to to have slightly less emphasis on the high school aspect. There's no special school event episodes like the culture fests or sports days, and the teachers are less prominent characters. Numerous scenes also take place outside of the school, and many of those focus on things unrelated to it. I mean, they even have an episode that takes place at an amusement park, whereas Azumanga only mentioned it, and there's no field trip or episodes focused solely on exams. Nichijou is also a lot faster paced than Azumanga on average, whereas the latter is what I'd call a quote-unquote relaxing comedy. Nichijou is a lot more standard in this sense. That's not to say it doesn't have its own personality, however. Like that show, Nichijou's humor often comes from the characters interacting in entertaining ways, a crucial element for any slice of life worth its salt, but perhaps even more energetic. In some ways, it even plays with and defies the tropes of this genre, pushing the boundaries of what can be done with it. That said, it's still very rich in that typical slice of life charm and heart that I also love. All in all, the series is fun as hell from start to finish. Admittedly, a lot of the humor does include an element of, shall we say, non-determinism. Normally what you call lol so random isn't enough to impress me comedically, but in this case it doesn't even matter. Because, and I'll be blunt here, Nichijou's humor is not just lol so random for the sake of it. It uses the absurdity to propel its insanely well-written gags to new heights, creating what I'd call structured randomness. Bit of an oxymoron, yeah, but I'd like you to think of a better way to describe it. Throughout the series, there's a few additional segments that recur, unlike Azumanga Daioh, which is always following the leads. Well, usually it is, anyway. I don't have nearly as much to say about these as the main two segments, so I'll discuss them here. Like Love, or Love Like, if you have the Blu-ray set that I do, debuts in the second half of the series and typically involves heartwarming life lessons of sorts, often not involving the main cast. These don't stick out in my mind as the series' top highlights, but they're nice when they happen. Same thing goes for the word time segments. What's really great, though, why I'm referring to the myth, the legend itself, this segment became a meme, and that's for good reason. Helvetica Standard is a fictional manga within the series world, and believe it or not, it's even more crazy than Nichijou itself. All sorts of dreamlike stuff happens in it, the most memorable of which being the literal Grim Reaper running around not knowing what the hell's going on. That one is in the first episode of the series, by the way. It's great. It's no wonder Helvetica Standard got published as an actual manga. Oh yeah, and another cool thing is when the series shows these serene, almost photorealistic scenes. They're very calm and above all else, downright beautiful to look at. Speaking of which, that's something I should discuss. Anime is notorious among general audiences for stiff animation and constant footage reuse. Its general art style is also controversial. Needless to say, I think this is overblown at best and complete poppycock at worst. I previously said that Azumanga Daioh was a gorgeous series, and I stand by that opinion. I found its animation way smoother than many people credit it for nowadays, and also thought its digipaint art style was really charming and generally appealing. That said, there were certainly limitations since it did come out back in 2002 after all. It's stuck in a 4:3 aspect ratio, standard definition, and has some moments of reused footage or occasionally limited animation techniques, since everything was done by hand, I presume at least. By the 2010s, that stuff was mostly irrelevant, allowing Nichijou to have a more refined visual presentation. It partly comes down to the resolution boost. We're no longer on DVD, but rather Blu-ray. This gives us the capability for 16:9 widescreen in full HD, which is a really nice improvement. Being that guy who spends a lot of his time playing old games and consoles that only support sub-HD resolutions, 4:3 really doesn't bother me as long as it's not stretched, but I'd still like the highest quality possible for the best viewing experience I can get. By that same token, Nichijou's refined, clean visuals make it very appealing to look at, which is especially essential for non-interactive stuff like this to get right. There's no gameplay to distract you from how it looks, so if it's ugly, then it becomes far more distracting. Thankfully, Nichijou lives up to the modern standard of animated series, even discounting the art style and animation themselves. So let's take the diss out of discounting and talk the art style and animation themselves. Holy crap, biscuits, this show looks amazing. I've heard it has incredible animation and whatnot, but wow, I didn't know it would be this good. This anime adaptation had an immeasurable amount of passion and love poured into it, and its stunningly beautiful animation and art style are proof of that to me. It's colorful, the backgrounds and lighting are dense, the animation looks so smooth. I can't begin to imagine how much work this must have taken to pull off, and I'm so glad they put that extra effort in. It's to the point that even something as simple as Yuko rescuing a falling hot dog is a visual spectacle. No, seriously, I'm not joking. Not to mention, I also adore the character designs. They're a perfect fit for every character, featuring details that reflect their personality, and are ridiculously charming, which is an absolute necessity for a series like this. I also praise Azumanga Daioh for this, and Nichijou manages to do it just as well. I don't care if this makes me sound like a fool, but this series is among the most amazing looking animated shows that I've watched. I used to perceive the unwavering praise traditional animation gets as a pretentious circle jerk, but after watching shows like this, not only can I say it holds up, but it runs circles around computer animation most of the time, because unlike CGI, traditional animation doesn't age. CGI only looks good as long as the technology holds up, whereas Whereas this, that has no such limitation. Also, because I have no better spot to mention it, I like the music as well. The background production music enhances each scene it plays in, and the opening and closing themes are downright amazing, especially in the first half. The first opening, Hayadane no... no idea how to pronounce that. Doesn't matter. It's damn catchy, and so is the closing theme. I don't care for the second opening theme as much, although it's still fine. And the second ending credit sequence is really emotional. Not as much as a beautiful tearjerker as Raspberry Heaven, but getting there. Which brings me to the aspect that makes the slice of life genre tick, the characters. Sorry if I've spoiled this already, but yeah, I love pretty much all of them. Now, discussing the show's cast is a lot more complicated than doing so for Azumanga Daioh, for the simple reason that it's huge. There's so many named characters with their own scenes that it can start to make your head spin. I'll be honest, I don't even remember all their names, there's just so many. So here's the deal, alright? I don't want to spend half my damn life talking about every one of them, so I'll break this up into two halves. First, I'll discuss some noteworthy side characters that I like to mention, and second, I'll delve into who I consider the 6 main characters. Sound good? I hope so, because that's how I'm doing it. Don't like it? Well, I'm sorry. I was gonna say get the hell out, but that's kind of rude, so I'm sorry. Anyway, I'll kick this off with the faculty at Tokisanami High School, the school the series takes place at. First, the teacher some people consider the best character in the series, Izumi Sakurai. I can certainly understand why some people do. Sakurai is a polite young woman with an unfortunate case of social anxiety. She's extremely shy, which makes it difficult for her to discipline students, unlike the other faculty. She thinks everything she does is the wrong thing, which makes her very nervous and prone to apologizing a lot. So of course, she's the student's career advisor and counselor, who has to directly meet with them and provide advice that will affect their future lives. Basically, the perfect fit for the job. People think she's the best character because they find her shy nature adorable. She's a really sweet character that very rarely gets legitimately angry, and she's involved in some funny moments throughout. She's also really endearing, I'll give you that. I can't call her my favorite character though, and for a pretty simple reason. She doesn't appear nearly as often as other characters I consider contenders for my favorite, which limits her comedic potential a bit in comparison. I'm also not a teacher, never have been a teacher, and have no plans to become one, so I don't find what she goes through on a daily basis to be nearly as easy to relate to. I can attest to being a really shy son of a bitch in the past, but still. One of my favorite pairs of characters to watch, though, is for sure the school's administrators, Principal Shinonome and Vice Principal Kosuke Ora. I think I'm pronouncing that right. These two have a constant, ongoing feud with one another, all because the principal is concerned the VP will take his job. The two are involved in several iconic gags at various points throughout the series, which usually involve their rivalry in some way. One moment in particular that stands out to me is the statue scene. The principal is worried about a statue of himself in the school courtyard. The VP comes in and starts tormenting him yet again, saying he's getting a statue of himself, which implies that he'll soon be taking the principal's job. Soon enough, a group of workers bring in the vice principal statue, who also think the principal's statue is ugly, making the principal even more concerned. It eventually culminates in the workers calling both statues ugly, so they think both the administrators are ugly. It makes me laugh every time. These two work the best when they play off of one another, but they also have some pretty good solo scenes every now and then. The vice principal is involved in a subplot where he's a depressed loner, so that's cool. But what really sticks out in my mind is easily the series' most iconic scene. This is like the equivalent of the dream Osaka has while dozing off during the study group. Yuko stands outside the classroom one day as usual, but what she witnesses ends up being anything but usual. She sees a deer has made its way into the courtyard, which, isn't a particularly normal thing. She's instantly dumbfounded by its presence, while the thing just stares at her blankly. The principal approaches from behind with some rope, giving Yuko a legit panic attack, and what happens next has to be seen to be believed. The principal outright fights a literal deer, with genuinely impressive animation, as poor Yuko just sits there in complete shock at what she's witnessing. She bursts back into the classroom and tries to explain what just happened, interrupting class, but doesn't know what to say because, you try to explain something like that and have people actually believe you. From what I can tell, these series typically only focus on the students and teachers, so the fact the school's administration can be just as funny as them in this show is great. Like, you remember the principal from Azumanga Daioh? Exactly, me neither. So that's the faculty, but most of the series' characters are students. Why not talk about them for a little while? Starting with Tsuyoshi Nakanojo, since I don't have all that much to say about him admittedly. This guy is a special one. He embodies every negative stereotype of atheists or self-described rational thinkers. People in that general ballpark. Throughout the series, he's on a constant quest to disprove the supernatural, claiming that everything has a rational explanation. It wouldn't be bad on its own if he simply didn't believe in that stuff, but where he goes wrong is in how he approaches it. He directly confronts people people like fortune tellers and such, aggressively trying to prove everything they're doing is false. In fact, he even once traveled on foot for 8 hours just to do so, which ended up making him look like an ass anyway. As an actual person, he's not rude and even means well, but as soon as he steps out of school, he turns into a typical Redditor. I wouldn't be surprised if he one day started wearing a fedora and tipping it to honor Milady. His dream job is to be a scientist, a respectable goal, but again, what he does to disprove things makes him come off as a loser, and I love it. I'm not sure if Keiichi Arawi was aware of obnoxious internet atheism, but it almost feels like it with how perfectly this guy lampoons those people. You know, those people online who have so little self-awareness and things going on in their life that they waste countless hours of their lives viciously arguing to make themselves feel right about everything, and yet don't realize that they're making a complete ass of themselves. I'm always down to watch a mockery of that attitude, and Nichijou's is one of the funniest I've seen. Haruna Anaka is an interesting one as well, mostly because she's also involved in jokes that don't feature the main cast. She's a bright and cheerful person, but frequently experiences weird events that leave her completely stunned. All she can do when one of these things happens is to spout her catchphrase with an expression of pure shock. She's constantly getting bewildered by the things that happen around her and the weird things people ask her to do. Some of these moments are among the funniest parts of the series, especially when she goes to get some noodles and gets told to do odd things she doesn't understand. The cook gets increasingly irritated with her, but all she can do is sit there completely frozen, staring at him with that same expression as she shouts her catchphrase louder and louder. As she stands there, the guy's father suddenly returns out of nowhere for no reason whatsoever, further adding to the absurdity of the situation. Very stupid guy alert. The guy that came back wasn't his father, it was just a guy he admired in the, noodle industry. So how does Haruna react? She just sits there, more stunned than ever, holding the exact same expression. It's wonderful, really. While she doesn't strike me as a particularly essential character, I couldn't imagine the series without Anaka. And another one of the funniest characters in the series is without a doubt Misato Tachibana. She's involved in a running gag with Kojiro Sasahara, the crush of Mio, who I'll discuss later. By the way, did I mention that he rides a goat? Whoops, silly me. That's a pretty crucial detail I left out. Sorry about that. Anyway, Misato is one of Kojiro's classmates, and like Mio, she has a crush on him. But that said, with the way she interacts with him, you wouldn't think that. She's what you refer to as a tsundere, doubt I even said that correctly, a character archetype that appears harsh and vindictive on the outside and yet has a less aggressive side to them. Misato's softer side is in her relationship with Uebashi and Fei-chan, although they're still not totally safe from her tsundere rage. Also, domestic side note, but I have to mention the scene where Rabashi is having a bad day after she drops her food, but her friend Fei-chan tells her to keep a positive attitude, only for her good day to crumble to pieces as she too drops the popsicle she was eating, which ends in Rabashi telling her to stay positive. Good stuff. In any case, Misato is often calm, but once you get Kojiro involved, she spirals into an intense rage that just seems to come out of nowhere. It's funny as fuck. The best thing about the dynamic between these two, though, piss Misato off enough, which Kojiro can probably do just by looking at her funny, and she'll suddenly go full Doom guy. She brandishes a seemingly endless arsenal of realistic weaponry she pulls out of thin air. This ranges from standard guns all the way to rocket launchers and cannons. None of this ever kills or really injures Kojiro. Doesn't matter. Point is, it's absurd, over the top, and I can't get enough of it. As soon as I saw Misato on screen, I knew what time it was, and even though every time I knew it was coming, it still got me. Also, there's one scene where Kojiro uses a literal virtual boy, which is an instant laugh for a video game enjoyer such as myself. But those are just what I consider side characters. All of them are great on their own, but in my opinion, the characters that truly make this series something special are the following 6 that I'll be discussing. These 6 are what I would call the core cast of Nichijou. They're the most prevalent in this series, and are by far the ones I remember the most. I definitely like some more than others, and I certainly have my favorites that will become clear by the time I finish. But know that even if I disagree with you about what your favorite character is, I like every last one of them and believe the series would be worse off if they weren't here. You have to keep in mind, this series' character ensemble is incomprehensibly large, at least in comparison to Azumanga Daioh. I can't spend hours here dissecting each and every one of them in as much detail as I did for that show, so I've made the decision to limit the scope a little bit for the sake of keeping my sanity intact and actually getting some sleep for once. Who am I kidding? I'm not going to be able to sleep anyway. Sleep is terrible. In general, the concept of a core cast is somewhat arbitrary anyways, especially in a show with so many named characters like this. Okay, you've heard enough about this. I don't want to waste any more time. Let's just jump right in. I see no better character to start with than Mio Naganohara. Not for any particular reason, she's just the best one to start with if you ask me. If this was in the order from least favorite to favorite characters like I usually do, I'd be talking about her a little later than this, but these 6 characters are subdivided into 2 trios, so screw the emphatic structure I usually like to have. It's just easier this way. Anywho, Mio. She's one of the 3 characters that makes up the Trio Tsuchiraka, the main group of schoolgirls in the series, alongside her friends Yuko and Mai. On the outside, Mio seems like a pretty normal, cheerful schoolgirl. She's a very positive person and is almost always seen in a pleasant mood, remaining great friends with the other members of the trio as well as Nano when the 3 meet her later on. In essence, Mio is fairly similar to Chio. They look very similar down to the non-standard hair color and pigtails. I mean, For the love of God, Mio, Chio, come on. I refuse to believe that wasn't at least a little intentional. Keiichi was a fan of Azumanga Daioh, based by the way, so I will hear nothing to the contrary. They're both frickin' adorable as well, so there's that too. As I said, Mio is a great companion to her other friends, and they all enjoy each other's company. She's even an aspiring manga artist, and rather good at it too. In fact, she spends most of her free time drawing. All around, Mio seems like someone every kid should aspire to be like. Someone who keeps a positive attitude towards the world, works hard, and has a clearly defined idea of what they want to do when they grow up. However, Mio was hiding something. A dark side that she doesn't want anyone to figure out about. While she enjoys drawing manga, what she actually draws is where her deep, dark secrets comes in. A lot of the manga she sketches in private, which is often done within her school notebook by the way, is what's in a genre called ecchi yaoi. If you don't know what that is, it's probably better that way. I can't describe it in detail here on YouTube, but if you really want to know, I'll ask one question. Do you know what hentai is? If so, well, yaoi is far less intense, but still in that general ballpark. If you know, you know, wink wink. If you're still totally in the dark, Mio's manga involves her crush Kojiro a lot of the time. You can make an educated guess based on that information. Naturally, she's afraid of what others will think of her if they find out about this, and so goes to immense lengths to ensure that nobody discovers it. Really, while Mio is usually cheerful, she generally has an angry side. Her temper is quite short, and she'll fly off the handle if someone pisses her off enough. She won't brandish insane weaponry like Misato does, but she is a rather skilled martial artist. This is demonstrated in multiple scenes throughout the series, with some more of that spectacular animation that I can't get enough of. The most well-known of these is the scene simply called Mio Loses It by many people. At least that's how I knew it after seeing it in a Peter Canetter video. Basically, Mio and Yuko are near a convenience store minding their own business when a police officer approaches them. Yuko apologizes for some reason, but other than that, all seems normal. The officer says there's been a problem recently with counterfeit bills, to which Yuko asks if Mio has seen any. She hasn't, but after the officer says the culprit had a bag that looks just like hers, she starts to get really scared. Complete madness ensues as the officer demands to see inside her bag. That would be okay for her normally, but remember, this is Mio we're talking about, so she's carrying her manga around. The officer snatches it from her and gets a good long look at it, which is when she finally snaps. She knocks down the officer with an immense force and jumps into the air to grab the now falling manga pages. She manages to grab all except for one that her friend Yuko is now staring at in complete shock at what she's reading. Mio walks over to her and does that. This weird well-dressed man, who by the way shows up every now and then like he's the goddamn G-Man or something, comes over and tries to read the manga too, and Mio knocks the shit out of him in a similar fashion. Then Kojiro's goat comes over and tries to eat it. You get the idea. It's no wonder this is one of the series' most iconic moments. It's just too good. Another common source of Mio's anger is her best friend Yuko. These two are extremely close to one another, but more often than not, Mio's outbursts are directly caused by something that she does. This can be anything from nearly discovering her manga to making a joke that doesn't land, or even something as simple as getting her the wrong lunch. However, it's only ever over a momentary disagreement or difference between the two, and afterwards they always come out even closer than they were before. Without a doubt, my favorite scene involving both of these two is in episode 14, where Yuko gets Mio the wrong lunch. Yuko for some reason doesn't learn the lesson that Osaka did, and tries kicking her shoe to foretell the weather. Guess what happens? In the confusion, she ends up getting Mio's lunch wrong. She wanted yakisoba, or fried noodles, but Yuko got her yakisaba, or fried mackerel. A huge argument follows, getting pretty physical at one point. It's funny to see, but the way it ends is indescribably perfect. The two start complimenting each other in the same angry tone as their argument, a pretty clever way of flipping the dynamic, but immediately afterwards, one of the most heartwarming moments in the series transpires. Mio and Yuko get primed and ready to punch each other, but instead of that, aw man, now that's just sweet. The two were genuinely angry at one another, but just like that, their friendship is restored. The two girls give each other a big hug, impressing everyone. Hell, even Mai cracks a smile at how endearing the moment was. It's these kinds of things where this series' writing shines. I remember, above all the others, these moments which inspire both laughs and warmed hearts. Mio's relationship with Yoshino is also pure comedy gold. For Mio, Yoshino is a part-time big sister, full-time pain in the ass. Yoshino is a college student, but still acts as though she's in high school. She's constantly playing pranks on Mio, much to the latter's anger. Except while Mio still gets along with Yuko at the end of the day, despite their differences, Yoshino is a consistent thorn in her side from beginning to end. Not once is Mio happy to be in the same room as her older sister, and if anyone can inspire Misato-like rage from Mio, it's her. To be fair, her pranks are pretty despicable in many ways, especially when she gets Mio to eat something so disgusting it nearly gives her a freaking heart attack. In general, it's a classic case of sibling rivalry, and a consistently funny one at that. Mio is a great character. I will never agree with those who say she's unlikable or a jerk. Well man, I sure did mention Yuko a lot there, so so why not talk about her next? I have a fair bit to say about her as well, so let's go for it. If Mio is the equivalent to Chiyo, then Yuko is without a doubt the closest analog this series has to Tomo Takano. I'd even say the two somewhat resemble each other. Yuko's hairstyle is similarly pointy, and extremely similar to Tomo's from the third year especially. That's very fitting too, since they resemble each other in more ways than just their physical appearance. Yuko is the resident Genki girl of the cast, which if you don't know what that means, it's quite simple. She's energetic, prone to occasionally overstepping her boundaries, and is a bit of an airhead a lot of the time. She gets poor results on her tests, always copies her homework from others, typically Mio, and falls asleep or daydreams in class very frequently. Her daydreams usually involve her own personal interpretation of where those strange wooden cubes Mio has come from. You know, the ones that keep her pigtails in place, which is this imaginary airship society known as the Fae Kingdom. These scenes have funny moments on their own, particularly when all the faceless grunts have to impress Princess Starla, or when Mio breaks in and wrecks their shit. However, while Yuko is certainly a Genki girl, she's not quite as all-out energetic as Tomo was. She loves to tell jokes, often trying, and failing, to make her friends Mio and Mai laugh, and she has a rather easygoing worldview. She, like Mio, generally tries to keep an upbeat attitude. That being said, if you insult her, her mood instantly shifts. She goes from her usual cheerful demeanor into a defensive one. It's most common whenever she gets into an argument with Mio, or when Mai antagonizes her. On top of this, she loves to greet others by saying, which translates to good morning in Indonesian or Malay. Speaking of that, this series actually has quite a few references to Indonesian culture, including a guy who looks like a former president of the country, as well as other words the characters speak from the language. Getting back on track, Yuko also has a lot of similarities to Tomo's comedic foil Yomi. Not in terms of personality or trying to lose weight, but in what happens to her. Throughout the series, Yuko experiences a constant stream of misfortune and bad luck, to the point you think she was cursed as a child or something. Whenever one of these unlucky moments happens, this dog named Buddy comes over and puts his paw on her as a means of consoling her. And it's not just a dog randomly showing up, he legitimately runs away from his owners to do this, and like he's fucking senses her in the Matrix or something. There's also a manga exclusive scene I'd like to mention, because it was surprisingly intense, and is a perfect example of Yuko's constant misfortune. Chapter 191, which is the penultimate one of the 10th and final volume, is a sequence of Shiratori that starts off relatively normal. Then this happens to Yuko. Yeah, she's just minding her own business, and then out of nowhere, a frickin' boa constrictor comes and entangles her. Yuko was already established as being deathly afraid of snakes, so I'm sure this is basically her worst nightmare come true. What ensues is this crazy scramble where Mio tries to find someone to help free her, coming across Tanaka in the same situation, and when he broke free using his own manpower, it legit made me root for the characters to help Yuko. Poor girl doesn't deserve this stuff. Well, they get back to her and, oh dear god. Tanaka then takes the snake and violently whips it, freeing Yuko as she smiles, basically saying, "Don't worry everyone, I'm alright," which genuinely made me pump my fist in the air. What an emotional roller coaster. They set up a situation and executed it so perfectly there. First, Yuko has a typical instance of the bad luck she has, which makes you feel really bad for her and root for her to get out of this situation. Then absolute madness, and then immense relief when she's finally freed. Nothing more to say, absolute Kino. Bravo, Vince. Some people consider Yuko their favorite character in the series. I'm not sure if I fully agree with that, but I'll give you this, Yuko is a great character. I say that because there's another character I'll talk about later on that may just be even better. Not saying anything definitive right now, but yeah, keep your eyes peeled. Regardless, Yuko is one of the best characters in the whole series, and if nothing else, is a close contender for my favorite. She's just awesome. The situations she finds herself in are nothing short of hilarious, and the way she reacts is always a treat. In particular, moments like the deer wrestling, the police officer scene, that time she stabs herself with a pen by accident, and even something as simple as her eating melon bread that's most likely expired. Special mention goes to the parts where she has this completely straight-faced expression. This is used to great effect when she and Mio go to an amusement park, and she loses her wallet. The two go on a bunch of rides, but the whole time Yuko holds that same unamused expression, and god man, it's so good. Also, need I even mention the shrine incident? No, I don't think so. I also love the scenes where Mai messes with her, which more often than not leaves her completely dumbfounded or pisses her off in an entertaining way. However, the reason I really love Yuko as a character? Oh, only because she's one of the most relatable characters in all of animation. I can name several examples of this particular effect, so how about we go through them all? Yuko is a slacker, as I've gone into, and as such, she rarely does her own homework. In one scene, she tries to, but gets so bored that she nearly passes out. She paces around her room, procrastinating, and crying about how much she doesn't want to do the homework. Instead, she gets distracted and ends up writing poetry. And to be fair, while she's not great at school, Yuko is rather good at writing poems. This scene is a perfect representation of how homework feels to do. I'm sure many people can attest to that. It's something something you have to do, so often the only way to do it is to force yourself. This is especially relatable to me now after the semester I just went through. It was a fine semester, but there was this one piece of shit fucking awful textbook service I had to suffer through using for a physics class. It's super picky about your inputs and only gives you 3 chances to answer a question correctly. That service made me a Yuko whenever I had to engage with it. I didn't want to do it, but had to suffer through it anyway, and it was hard not to feel how she did every time I had to do it. On top of this, like Sakaki from Azumanga, Yuko has social anxiety and struggles to interact with strangers. She often doesn't know what to say in awkward situations and ends up getting really embarrassed. There's 2 that come to mind immediately. First, one day she heads over to Daiku Coffee and decides to order an espresso. She misinterprets the place's menu and is instantly embarrassed. Her and the cashier have an awkward exchange where Yuko struggles to decide what she wants. The clerk asks if she wants things that make no sense, including something called a doppio. After this chaos, all she can do is sit at one of the coffee shop's tables, completely crushed by the experience. A waiter brings over the espresso she ordered, which is way smaller than she expected. Yuko's awkwardness and fear of being judged prevented her from properly placing her order, and because of this, she becomes dejected. When she leaves the shop, she tells herself that she'll order coffee from a vending machine from now on. It's hard not to feel a bit bad for the poor girl after this stuff, you know? However, even that doesn't compare to the big one. It's probably my favorite scene involving her because it's just so painfully relatable. So one weekend during the 18th episode, Yuko is on a train. Oh yeah, by the way, nice outfit there. Anyway, she's going to the town next door to meet Mai because it's apparently Halloween. While on the train, she overhears the woman sitting to her left ask, "Do you want some bread?" Yuko, having eaten already, politely declines, but when she looks over, she realizes the lady was asking a small dog she brought on the train with her about the bread. A little embarrassing, but Yuko brushes it off and keeps to herself. Then she sees an old lady in front of her who she thinks wants to sit down somewhere. Being polite once again, she stands up, but turns out she didn't want to sit down. By this point, that's 2 for 2, and Yuko doesn't know what the hell to do. Hey, wait a minute, did I just— The poor girl tries to play it off by saying it's her stop and starts blushing uncontrollably with embarrassment. Only making matters worse is the little girl, Misato's sister Mihoshi, to her right, who starts giggling at her. In a stroke of sheer luck though, Yuko's stop actually is the next one, which she's quite pleased about. Nice timing, announcer! She puts on her backpack and waits for the doors to open with a serious expression. The train stops and the doors open on the other side of the cabin. When Yuko realizes this, she looks behind herself in utter horror. She clenches her hands into fists and walks to the other side. Mihoshi tries not to laugh again, only making poor Yuko even more embarrassed. She then walks out of the train with her eyes closed and bumps into someone. Again, being as polite as she is, she apologizes and bows to the person, but when she opens her eyes, she sees it was a statue. Mihoshi walks off the train, laughs at her again, and Yuko storms off with the last sliver of dignity she has remaining. She heads towards Daiku Burger, and it seems like her bad day is finally gonna get better. But in typical Yuko fashion, it doesn't. Her suffering isn't over just yet. On her way to the restaurant, Yuko gets lost and Mihoshi seems to follow her. She tries to ask some of her directions, but accidentally asks another statue. Mihoshi laughs at her again, but for Yuko, this is the final straw. Having had enough, she turns around and snaps at her, getting rightfully pissed. Mihoshi points her in the right direction and the two head towards Daiku Burger. Once inside, Mihoshi meets up with her sister and all poor Yuko can do is bury her face in her hands. That's it. This image right here. It is the embodiment of why Yuko is such an endearing character. You can't help but feel bad for her because you've no doubt gone through similar struggles to her. And if you haven't, I would recommend you quit lying. Anyway, while Yuko is in the restaurant, she comes across Mai, dressed in a Halloween costume. She decides, yeah, why not, and pulls out one of those pairs of glasses with a fake nose. Yuko says trick or treat to Mai, but this is the final 1-2 punch of embarrassment for her. As it turns out, Halloween was a week ago. All of that was really funny, but like I said, it's also kinda sad because it's true. While that mention of Mai there would be a perfect transition to talk about her, I'll do that in a second. There's still a couple more brief things I need to mention for Yuko. Her mother is a bit crazy and often contributes to her suffering. She's extremely strict, although it's played with enough levity to be funny. The part that stands out for me in particular is when Yuko fakes an illness to get out of an exam, which her mother doesn't believe, and when Yuko makes a bunch of noise, after which her mother comes in and knocks her to the ground. We don't really see Yuko's mother a lot, but when we do, that's basically what happens. With all that stuff mentioned, if you really want a scene that particularly encapsulates Yuko's endearing relatability, look no further than this one short sequence from the 23rd episode. Yuko is seen going through an average day in her life. It starts with her doing some homework, during which the page rips. She tries to get some coffee to wake up the next morning, but it's all out, and soon after steps in a piece of gum while walking down the street. Anyway, she sits down on a bench for a second, but it turns out the paint is still wet. She then tries to ride a bike, but for whatever reason, the seat has been replaced with broccoli. And when on another train, all she can do is angrily sit there as some obnoxious people sleep while leaning on her. As this happens, the train stops, and we see 3 simple words that summarize Yuko's life in a nutshell. Someone save me. I couldn't have said it better myself. All in all, Yuko is one of the best characters this show has to offer. She's funny, she's charming, she's relatable, and she's downright enjoyable to watch. I could not imagine this show without her, and I fully understand why a sizable portion of this series fans consider her their favorite character. So with all that laid out, time for the final Trio Tsuchiraka character, Mai Minakami. The first thing that comes to mind when I think of Mai is, damn, she's like if Osaka, Yomi, and Sakaki from Azumanga Daioh were combined into a single person. Mai resembles Osaka quite a bit, with similarly big eyes, a similar head shape, and a nearly identical hairstyle. Difference is she wears glasses like Yomi, and has a personality more reminiscent of Sakaki. She's fairly reserved and doesn't talk very often, only totaling about 4 minutes of lines in all the 11 hours of the series runtime. And when she does speak, it's in a very soft voice. She is easily the most calm member of the trio and constantly has a flat, emotionless demeanor. If Mai ever does show emotion, it's in the form of a simple smile or flash of anger on her face. Seems like a pretty uninteresting character, huh? Well, that's absolutely not the case. Mai is a bit of a wild card. While she appears rather normal and nonchalant on the surface, lurking underneath that exterior is a Cloud Cuckoo Lander that's fully aware of and embraces her secret silly nature. Mai loves screwing with people, particularly playing pranks on them, and they're not some fakey bullshit YouTube prankster shit. This is straight up psychological warfare. In fact, she loves doing this so much that she'll even prank her dogs, and if she has no one else to do it on, she'll end up pranking herself. Mai has been friends with Yuko since the two were in grade school, ever since she moved to Japan from Alaska. Yeah, apparently Mai was either born there or lived there a substantial amount of time. In any case, Mai's pranks can range from innocuous, such as reciting a spell from the NES game Dragon Quest for no reason, to downright gaslighting, such as when she briefly convinced Yuko that she had feelings for her. Still more fall in between those two extremes, including when she puts her glasses into a house of cards Yuko and Mio were building. That said, even though most of her screen time is focused on pranks, she doesn't come off as an asshole with no moral compass. Her friends still enjoy her company, and she's still a good person at heart. Above all else, she has standards towards who she pulls pranks on. For example, she never intentionally pranks children, including Hakase. She's also capable of recognizing when the right and wrong times to pull pranks are. When Mio and Yuko have their huge argument over the fried noodles, she just stays quiet, and after they forgive each other and shake hands, Mai is seen smiling, indicating that she's relieved the two made up and resolved the argument. Additionally, when she does inadvertently cause someone harm in some way, she always makes an effort to apologize. For instance, when Hakase gets scared away by Mai's dogs, Mai heads over to her house to say sorry. All of this indicates that Mai isn't some bad-natured prankster that ruthlessly pulls harmful pranks on everyone she meets for the sake of it, but rather a quiet girl that likes to have some fun. It's just that her idea of fun is really weird and often comes with the side of screwing with people a little bit. Mai's antics are rather funny in my eyes. Yeah, really is that simple. The other characters' reactions to them, particularly Yuko's, are always a treat, since they act like she's doing something way more serious. I also love the scenes where Mai acts as the straight man to someone else's weirdness, especially when Yuko makes a joke that doesn't land. Mai just stares at her emotionlessly without saying a word, indicating she's not amused. That's really all I have to say about Mai. Mai is funny and a worthy member of the cast, but probably the overall weakest of the trio if I'm to be honest. If she talked a bit more, there's a chance I'd rank her higher, but as is, she's well written and has several moments that stick out in my mind. So with all that said, why don't we move on to the second main trio of the series? If the trio Tsuchiraka are the main schoolgirls of the entire show, then at least for the series' first half, these next three characters are the stay-at-home aspect. I'm of course referring to the Shinonome household trio, made up of Nano, Hakase, and Sakamoto. I'll talk about Sakamoto first, the man, or rather, cat of the house. I chose him first because he's my overall least favorite of this trio, although I still like him. Sakamoto is a cat. Only insightful commentary that teaches you things you never knew is allowed in this channel. He was originally owned by Kana Nakamura, the science teacher from Tokisadame High School, where he was named Taisho. Due to Nakamura's poor ownership, he decided to run away from home, deciding that sleeping in a box in a dark alleyway is a better way to live. One day, Nano comes across him and finds him extremely cute, but doesn't take him back because she figures there's already enough going on in the house. However, when she gets home, it appears the professor has taken him back anyway. Both of them instantly fall in love, complete with this scene where they gush over how fluffy he is. Hakase then decides to invent a scarf that allows the cat to talk, but as soon as she puts it on him, it's revealed that the cat has a condescending personality. He's pretty strict, rather harsh, and demands to be treated like an elder. However, the two Shinonome girls don't do that, as expected, and hilarity ensues. Hakase in particular is prone to messing with him, often blaming him for things she did. That said, while he likes to think he's mature, Sakamoto is still prone to acting like a typical cat would. Swing a string near him or throw a ball around and he'll uncontrollably run after it, as if his AI is programmed to do that or something. Being a man who has 4 cats in his house, I find this really funny. He's just a funny character in general. I'll be honest, there's a few moments here and there where it doesn't land as much as it probably could have, and his dickishness comes off as a bit much, but those are few and far between. And that right there, folks, is the closest thing to a criticism I have of this series. And it's not even a big deal whatsoever. Most of the time it works for me, and Sakamoto's time on screen is consistently quite funny, and he plays off the other characters very well. He's like Misato in that sense. He's an asshole for sure, but a hilarious asshole. It's very fitting for a cat, a species of pet infamous for seemingly thinking highly of themselves, at least in comparison to dogs, who are just idiots. I'd say his best moments are when he's playing off of Hakase, as the two have a very similar dynamic to Yuko and Mai. One moment that comes to mind involves that huge tube of superglue she made, which he gets stuck in. He gets extremely irate, yelling at her for getting him into this situation, and all he can do is squirm around. All this does is get him stuck even more, and eventually appearing as no more than a blob of it. Near the end of the series, he also comes across Nakamura again, and as she's running from her, he weighs his options. Initially, he thinks the Shinonome household is unequivocally better, but thinking back to that girl's antics, he isn't so sure and basically concludes that his life sucks balls in general. Sakamoto is a really funny character, and even though I feel they could have toned him down a teensy bit in certain instances, he's well written enough that I still overall enjoy his inclusion as is. Next, my second favorite of the Shinonome trio, Hakase. I've been calling her that for this whole video because that's what they call her in the show, but it's not actually her real name. If you translate it to English, it's a word that means professor or doctor or PhD, you know, something in that general ballpark. So her name is simply Professor Shinonome, revealing that it's obviously a title and not her actual name, which is unknown. However, I will still refer to her by her Japanese name, as weird as it is for me to say, because I don't feel like saying the professor over and over again. Hakase is an 8-year-old child with an incredibly above average intellect. And I'm beginning to realize I might have jumped the gun a little bit with referring to Mio as this series' closest analog to Chiyo. I'll go with this. It's like Chiyo's traits were split into two people. Her cheerfulness and hairstyle went to Mio, while her intellect, age, hair color, and childish aspects went to Hakase. Except, she's even younger, smarter, and somehow more self-sufficient. She lives by herself, with no parents in sight, and it's unknown if she's even aware of who they are. That doesn't matter though, because the important part is her occupation. She's an inventor, and is capable of creating some pretty impressive stuff. In fact, the formal name of her household is Shinonome Laboratories. She's the one who created Sakamoto's scarf that allows him to talk, but that's not anywhere close to the most significant thing she's produced. Her most notable creation is actually another character, Nano. Yeah, so remember how I mentioned in passing that this series had a robot girl? That's Nano. I'm gonna have quite a lot to say about her in a little bit, so stay tuned. I'm still not done with Hakase yet. As mentioned, she has a very high intellect for her age, but like Chiyo, that doesn't automatically make her mature. She's still very much a child and tends to act like one. She loves sharks, eating snacks, and playing around the house, enjoys drawing things, has a short attention span, and sometimes acts spoiled or throws tantrums. These things often get her in trouble, and as I said before, she typically shifts a lot of the blame onto Sakamoto, even if doing so makes literally no sense. Later on in the series, she also becomes friends with the trio Tsuraka, especially Yuko. The two share a similar easygoing worldview and are both fairly energetic, so they're a perfect match for one another. On the whole, she's rather childish. I have seen people who don't care for her, but honestly, I think she's an entertaining, endearing character. She might come off as annoying to those around her, but at heart, she's good-natured and fun-loving. Like Chiyo, she has her fair share of cute moments that are rather heartwarming, especially when she's with Nano. The scene that immediately comes to mind for me is one night in the 13th episode. It's stormy outside, complete with heavy rain and lightning. Hakase can't sleep because she has to go to the bathroom, but she's too scared to get up because of the thunderstorm and the noise it's causing from an old rickety chimney on the house. She tries to wake up Nano, which takes a bit for her to do, but when she does, she asks her if the two can go to the bathroom together. As they're walking to the bathroom, Nano gets frightened by the lightning, which makes sense because she's a robot after all. This prompts Hakase to comfort her, after which the two hug each other in the hall, and it's just the sweetest fucking thing in the world. The next scene with these two that comes later in this particular episode is just as, if not more endearing, but I'll bring that scene up when it becomes relevant. I also already brought up the moment where she makes friends with Mai, so I don't need to go into that one again. But there's also that time she puts on this cute frog-like coat and plays in the rain. Also, she briefly turns into Osaka during the time she's seen using humanity's greatest invention besides computer and video games. Which, yeah, I forgot to mention that scene in my Azumanga Daioh retrospective, but give me a break, alright? Regardless, Hakase is basically paralyzed by it and doesn't want to get out from underneath. Nano tells her not to fall asleep under it, using that old myth children are told about catching a cold as an excuse, but she does anyway. Nano tries to wake her up, but it's no use. She's in too deep and already sleeping, so you might as well just let things run their course. Also, that part at the start of episode 6, or episode 5 or something, whatever, where Nano and her are talking to each other like a mother and their child, or a big sister, little sister, which is, it's just cute, okay? Hakase is definitely up there in terms of my favorite characters in the series. Her scenes are pretty damn entertaining, and her childlike innocence is endearing to watch. Her relationship with Nano embodies this perfectly, having moments that are both funny and heartwarming. I probably sound like I'm repeating myself, but I want to emphasize that I enjoy her quite a lot. That may be an unpopular opinion, but allow me to ask you one simple question. When the hell have I ever cared if what I have to say isn't the popular take? While lots of Western fans of this series share a mutual disdain for this character, I sure as hell don't. Also, my god, are these transitions where her and Nano play rock, paper, scissors with each other adorable. The two sing a little song, play their hands, and then something funny happens. Special mention goes to the one where Nano replaces her hand with a shark plushie, leaving Hakase amazed as she says, "I love you" in Korean. Guys, you can't be throwing stuff this cute at me this often. I'm gonna have a fucking heart attack. Oh yeah, by the way, that reminds me, I still haven't discussed my favorite character in the series yet. You may have thought that Yuko was my favorite because of how long I talked about her for. As I said, I love Yuko as a character, but she's not who I'd call my favorite in the series. No, dear viewer. While I've more or less ditched the emphatic structure in this video because it would have made me look at the characters in a really strange order, I've at least tried to build up to this last character I wanted to talk about. By the process of elimination, you've probably been able to deduce which character that is, especially because I literally said I'd be talking about them in a minute, but anyway. My favorite character in Nichijou is definitely none other than Nano Shinonome, the last but certainly not least member of the Shinonome Labs trio. Where the hell do I even begin with her? Well, as I literally just said, I think she's the best character. She is best girl, and none of you degenerates can change my mind. Yes, Yuko is also amazing, and that should be abundantly clear because of how long I spent talking about her. She comes extremely close to being my favorite, and if it wasn't for Nano, she absolutely would be. Also, I don't know if I can say Nano outdoes Osaka as my favorite anime character in general, but god damn it does she come close. As I've said, Nano is not an ordinary human girl, but rather a robot that was built by Hakase. She lives in the Shinonome Laboratory's residence with her, and since Hakase lacks a parental figure with how she lives, Nano takes up the role of a mother for her. Side note, but isn't that just enough to warm your heart on its own? I mean, the 8-year-old creates a robot friend for herself, and the two love each other so much that they share a mother-daughter relationship with each other. It's only made more endearing by the lyrics of one of Nano's character songs. It's literally called Nano's Screw Rhapsody in English. Kind of funny name without context, but it will make more sense soon. One verse reads, and I quote, "Only playing pranks, even though it's so unreasonable. I can't leave her alone. I have to protect my precious professor." God damn it. If you don't find that to be the most heartwarming fucking thing in the world, you officially have a severe case of small heart disease. Trademark. But there's more to it than that. Oh man, so much more. This whole Nano acting as a mother to Hakase thing is only the beginning. Nano, being such an advanced robot, wants to be seen as a regular girl. She's worried about people trying to catch her and conduct experiments on her, and that people will judge her and refuse to be friends with her if they find out about it, so she tries to hide her true nature as much as she can. Unfortunately, this is pretty difficult for poor Nano as she constantly gets modified by her creator. She has a bit of a case of feature creep, having all sorts of things that come off as useless or counterproductive. She can shoot out her hands, dispense roll cakes from her elbow, there's a cuckoo clock on her head, and of course, her big toe was secretly a USB thumb drive with a grand total of 1 gigabyte of storage. Wow. Impressive. You can hold what, maybe 1/3 of this video on it or something. However, the most obvious sign of Nano's true nature is the gigantic wind-up key on her back. The one thing that gives away the fact she's not exactly human on a surface level. It's basically pointless, as cranking it doesn't give her power or anything. All it does is launch her big toe, and it spins whenever she's really happy or flustered. Other than that, it causes some problems for her. She can't lay on her back or roll over while she's sleeping or sit back on benches or chairs. It can be removed, but by anyone except for Nano herself. Overall, she has a pretty good case to make for it to be removed permanently with very logical reasons. However, Hakase is a child, and therefore can't be reasoned with. She thinks the key is cute, and as a result refuses to take it out. The thing is a constant source of Nano's anxiety, and she acts reserved and shy as a result of its presence. She doesn't want to draw any attention to it because it's a dead giveaway to the fact she's a robot. If anyone notices, she instantly has a panic attack and tries everything she can to change the topic to anything else. She wants so badly to be normal, and eventually attend high school just like any other ordinary girl, but the key prevents her from blending in as she wants to. So she has to essentially live with it and try her best not to get found out. With how much she wants it gone, it's hard not to root for her the whole time. I cannot mince words. Nano Shinonome is easily the sweetest, most endearing, most likable character in the entire series. Yuko, as should be clear by now, comes very close, but she doesn't quite outdo Nano in this sense. In the first half of the series, Nano acts primarily as Hakase's caretaker, who dreams about going to school like an ordinary girl. The situations these two get into are hilarious, as I said, and like I said, Nano's motherly relationship with her creator is extremely endearing. Even though Hakase can get on her nerves on occasion with her constant insistence on eating snacks even when told not to, childish tendencies, and refusal to remove Nano's key, you get the sense that these two care for each other dearly and would put their life on the line if it meant saving the other. Not to mention, Nano is also insanely innocent. She's definitely the most polite member of the whole cast, and the only time she shows anger are when Hakase does something she shouldn't. If you want a good example as to how innocent of a character she is, look no further than a scene called Cry of Youth. She and the professor are watching TV one night, and and some romantic show comes on. Nano gets flustered and confused as to what's happening, and fearfully asks if she should change the channel. See what I mean? She's too precious for this fucking world. However, once the second half of the series arrives, that's where she especially shines. She's great from start to finish, but it's that second half where her absolute best moments come in. Let's talk about that breadcrumb I dropped when talking about the 13th episode a little bit ago. Shortly after the thunderstorm scene, the day arrives when one of Nano's greatest dreams finally comes true. It's a normal sunny day in the Shinonome household. Hakase comes running down the hall like she's Sonic or something, knocking into Sakamoto and scattering a bunch of clothes everywhere. She gets up and commences one of the most heartwarming parts of the entire series, if not the most. Nano asks her if she can help with the laundry, and she speaks the words that Nano had only dreamed of coming out of her mouth.
Starting tomorrow, you can go to school.
And let me tell you, the ensuing scene is something so cute it needs to be seen to be believed. Nano is taken aback by this and is left in disbelief. She struggles to contain her joy and excitement, but still considers the possibility that Hakase is only messing with her. She asks if Hakase is telling the truth, and she shakes her head yes. Nano still can't believe it and asks why she decided she can go, and Hakase responds very simply, "It's the right thing to do." Do I need to say anything else? By the way, can I take a moment to compliment the voice acting? The cast had a boatload of fun recording lines for it, and you can just tell that. Nano's voice actress was a particularly great choice, and is no doubt a large factor that makes her such an endearing character. Regardless, Nano asks Hakase to remove her key again, but before they can get to talking about that, Hakase brings out something she was saving just for this occasion. A school uniform just for Nano. Upon laying her eyes on this, it's over. Nano explodes with joy even more than she already had, and she flat out squeals. She starts crying tears of joy and rushes over to the professor to give her a big hug. The two repeat each other's name over and over again, and man, it's just heartwarming as fuck. Are you beginning to see why I think Nano is my favorite character in the series? Even just this moment she finds out she can go to school is one of the cutest damn things I think I've ever seen. And the next 13 episodes of the series then follow Nano's experiences attending Tokisadame High School, all the while meeting up with and making friends with the trio Tsuchuraka. Her introduction to the class doesn't go as well as she'd hoped, as she's really shy during it, which makes her think she's squandered any chance of being seen as normal. However, as soon as she meets Yuko, Mio, and Mai, they hit it off. She had absolutely nothing to be worried about. Yuko suspects that Nano might be a robot, making her beyond scared, but Mio says she's an idiot for thinking something so ridiculous. Heh, how ridiculous. Wouldn't it be funny if it was actually true? Yuko's gut feeling is confirmed to be accurate when she comes over to the Shinonome labs though. Hakase says she's created Nano and demonstrates several of her features right in front of her, leaving the latter mortified. However, even when she's presented with irrefutable evidence that Nano is a robot, how does Yuko respond? She doesn't care. In fact, she only becomes closer to Nano after finding out. Same thing for her other friends. But to them, that doesn't even matter. Nano had nothing to worry about because her friends don't care that she's a robot. All they care about is that she's a great friend, irrespective of her true nature. That's just arbitrary at the end of the day. Sure, that one science teacher, Kana Nakamura, does try to catch Nano so she can experiment on her, but who cares? All of her attempts fail. Although that one moment where she comes over to the Shinonome labs and gets stuck in the superglue is pretty damn funny. I mean, basically all her attempts are really funny, but anyway. The arc about the key also comes to a very uplifting conclusion. As you all know, she wants it to be removed because she sees it as nothing but an inconvenience that's an obvious sign she's a robot. She keeps asking the professor to remove it for the whole series, and time again, she refuses because she thinks it's cute, even going so far as to make Nano's school uniform tailor-made to allow her to put it on without removing the key. Near the end of the series, though, the young professor seems to change her mind. She suddenly comes up and just yanks it right out of Nano's back, which makes her extremely happy. She says she'll remove the large nuisance from Nano permanently and replace it with a much smaller one which will be practically unnoticeable. Needless to say, Nano is elated at the thought of this. It's actually rather satisfying to see that this endearing sweetheart of a character will finally be getting the thing she wanted most, even more than being able to go to school. However, when Hakase tries to put the small key in there, it's broken, and so puts the big one back in, so it's gonna have to wait a little bit. While at school that day, Nano runs into Yuko, and on accident, Yuko pulls her detachable hand off. Nano is once again embarrassed because it's yet another giveaway to the fact she's a robot. However, Yuko's first instinct isn't to notice she's a robot and point it out, but rather ask if she's okay. It may seem a little pointless to bring attention to this brief scene, but trust me, it becomes important in a moment. Later that day, Nano is having her school friends over for her birthday, so Hakase's timing for removing the key couldn't have been better. She'll finally be able to blend in, and none of them will ever have a thought even remotely close to, what if Nano's a robot again, just like she's always wanted. When Nano gets home, Hakase yanks the key out of her back, and she couldn't be happier. She then hears Yuko and Mio and realizes she'd better go hide the key so none of them ask about it. However, as she's walking through the hallway to find a hiding spot, she remembers something. She has a flashback to that moment I mentioned a second ago where Yuko completely glosses over over her removable hand. She's surprised by this and then remembers when Hakase said the key was cute. What's going on right now? Finally, and this is the one that really sticks out, she remembers back to when Yuko came over to her for the first time. When she was about to leave the Shinonome household, she said, "Nano, you're just Nano. Isn't that enough? It's easy to see what's happening here." Nano had her key removed, but she realizes that she isn't any happier than she already was. Her friends paid no mind to it, and in fact just saw it as a part of her. A flurry of visions happens as Nano remembers all those times people greeted her and a tear strolls down her face. She had wanted the key removed so she could live an ordinary fun life with them, but in this moment, she realizes she was already doing that all along. In the end, Nano decides to keep the key because it's a part of who she was. Really, I can't see any better way to end this arc.
And the crazy thing is, this character arc is only in the anime. In the manga, it actually starts with her going to school, and even the scene where she's introduced, the professor just lets her go right to school. I mean, if the anime did the same thing, then maybe Yuko would be my favorite, but this character arc, this extremely heartwarming arc, alongside everything else, just on top of that, it's what makes Nano my favorite character in this whole series.
Yeah, I've been talking about Nano for quite a while, but even after all of that, I'm not sure if I'm underselling just how lovable of a character she is. She's the sweetest character in the whole series, and by extension the most likable, which is really saying a lot because I like pretty much every character I've talked about, and many I haven't talked about. Every last scene involving Nano is full of laughs, but what makes her so special is how heartwarming every damn thing about her character is. From the start of the series all the way to the end, she embodies everything I love not only about Nichijou, but these kinds of shows in general. I get why people like Yuko the most, and trust me, it was an unbelievably hard decision to pick a favorite between her and Nano. Yuko is a close second, and by close, I mean if the character stood a distance away from a line representing how much I like them, Yuko would only probably be a single centimeter away from Nano, probably even less than that. For me, however, Nano manages to win out by just that slightest bit because she's such a consistent positive influence on the audience. She's the kind of character that just makes you feel all happy inside and brightens your day up. All I can really say is, bravo, Mr. Arawi. All of your characters are great, but Nano is the one that stands out among the rest. This series is spectacular. I think I made it pretty clear by now. It's full of laughs, full of cheer, and is all around a great time from start to finish. But even with all that laid out, after all I've said about the series, maybe you still don't understand why it's so beloved. Don't worry, it's okay to be a soulless heathen with a black pit for a heart. Okay, I'm kidding, but still, you may be an outsider who looks at this series and thinks it's nothing more than a dumb show about dumb girls doing dumb things. You may question why or how the hell anyone can enjoy it. Well, I like to believe it's a little more than just because we like to watch these silly characters get into relatable situations that make us laugh. I mean, that's a huge part of it, but it's not the whole story. At least, I don't think anyway. To some, I might begin to sound like a total dunce, but if you would, allow me to explain why I think so many people, myself included, love this series so much. I think it comes down to one quote spoken by Mio in the 25th episode, the penultimate one. Her friends are dressed in daifuku masks and pretend to be other people giving away Mio a prize. She sees right through it, but regardless, they hand her a statue. As she walks away, the three peer around the corner, and afterwards Mio says the words I'm talking about. Our everyday lives may, in fact, be a series of miracles. I think those 11 words are a pretty close summary of what makes this series work so well. I noticed while watching it that there's several things that it seems to tend towards. A few themes or morals, if you will. Possibly unintentionally, but from how everything in the series points towards them, it's hard not to notice. Nichijou is a series that tells you that, in some ways, life kinda sucks. I mean, all those scenes of Yuko's daily struggles, or Nano getting worried about what will happen to her if people find out her true nature, and so on. Life is full of a bunch of hardships, worries, all sorts of things like that. But you can't let that get you down. It may be difficult, but you shouldn't take everything for granted. Life is, as Mio says, a series of miracles. I'm probably sounding like a total wank right now, but again, it's what I see in this series. Nichijou, to me, is all about letting go of all your worries as best you can and not letting them overtake and control your life, because there's no way you'll be able to do anything if you do. Nano is the perfect example of this. She's so worried about going to school and making friends because she's concerned everyone will hate her for being a robot, hate her for being different. I think you can see the analogy here. However, as she finds out, none of her true friends ever cared about that to begin with. They don't care what Nano is, they care about who Nano is, making her worries misplaced. You see what I'm getting at here? This series' underlying message is one of encouragement. While worries are a natural thing in our lives, dwelling on them and letting them consume you is no way to live. Because, even though it may not seem this way, the fact you have a life in the first place is a miracle on its own. It's not an insanely profound message, like yeah, don't be a Debbie Downer and expect the worst for literally everything. And I'll be the first to admit, a degree of pessimism is a healthy part of living a well-balanced life. But you can't just go into everything you do expecting that the worst will always occur, because doing so is a one-way ticket to constant misery. Now, it's good to prepare for the worst, but you shouldn't always expect it, and nobody wants to live their one and only life in constant misery. Again, you're probably not convinced. Maybe I sound like a complete raving lunatic madman right now, and you're ready to click off the video and never come back to my channel. but I'm saying all this for a reason. For me personally, I think this message is at the heart of Nichijou's appeal. I think it's what makes these characters so easy to relate to and so lovable on the whole. It's the thing that makes everything connect, and it's the reason why I believe this series is so loved by so many people. It isn't an explicit reason, and a lot of what makes this show so entertaining is its humor and fun characters, but looking to the inside, this message is the core of it all. It's that invisible quantity that makes everything work so well. Disagree all you'd like, that's totally fine. Maybe your interpretation is different, but everything I've said here is what I believe makes Nichijou tick on a fundamental level. It's one of those series that's hard to provide a solid explanation for your enjoyment of, but god damn it, I sure did try. That's really about it. Man, how long is this video again? Not quite as lengthy as the Azumanga Daioh retrospective, but that isn't to say Nichijou is a vastly inferior work or anything like that. In fact, I think it's so good that it made me question if Azumanga is still my favorite, because Nichijou is so close to it. Honestly, I'd probably still say the former is my overall preferred one of the two because I have a closer personal connection to it, but that's not to discount how great Nichijou was for me. It's an absolute joy on its own and was a pleasure to finally be able to watch. It's funny, it's charming, and above all else, it just makes me feel good when I watch it. It has a masterfully written jokes that make an expert use of absurdism. The side segments like Helvetica Standard are entertaining on their own. I love every character, particularly Yuko and the best girl Nano. On the whole, Nichijou is another anime that I love from top to bottom. I can easily see why so many people bring it up in the conversation for the best comedy anime, and whenever that topic comes up, it's a show I'll for sure be thinking of. It's such a shame this series wasn't well received when it first came out, because it deserves every ounce of love it's gotten over the years. Which makes me wonder, why hasn't this series gotten a second season yet? Azumanga Daioh fits its whole storyline into 26 episodes. Nichijou, on the other hand, only shows their first year within the same length. As great as the series is right now, I feel like more could have been done with these phenomenal characters and the potential situations they can get into, in an anime format at least. People have been asking for, sometimes even begging for the series to continue, so apart from money, I don't see why not. It's been over a decade since the anime ended, so the odds are rather slim, but good news, there's still hope.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
Yeah! As I said, the manga re-entered serialization a couple years ago, so there was clearly some demand for it to make a comeback. Because of that alone, the possibility of a second season is now more present than it's ever been over the last 10 years. If it happens, I'll for sure be there to watch it. I would be really happy, and I can't possibly imagine how amazing those who have loved it and cherished this series since its origins would feel. Until that day though, I still have these phenomenal 26 episodes to watch as much as I'd like. Thank you Keiichi Arari for this amazing series, and Kyoto Animation for the amazing work on the anime adaptation. And there we go. That's Nichijou. It feels good to explain in detail why I enjoyed this series so much. If anyone who watched my Azumanga Daioh retrospective when it came out wanted me to cover Nichijou, because I did mention it in that video, I hope it was worth the wait. When I watched this show over spring break last year, I knew I wanted to cover it in a video, and wow, it ended up being way longer than I expected. Although that's basically the theme of my show, making videos that are probably way longer than they need to be, and yet I still want to create anyways. Alright, I won't keep you here any longer. I'm not sure if I'll cover another anime, but if I do, it probably won't be for a little while. As for what my next video is, well, it's not going to be any shorter than this one, and that's what I'll say about that. In fact, it'll probably be even longer. So, I'm not going to tell you what it's about, but it's going to be interesting, I think. In any case, that's all from me. Salamat malam. I mean, come on, how else was I going to end it?